Governor Corzine today delivered an election year State of the State address, acknowledging economic hard times that he says can be overcome. His speech to a joint session of the legislature looked back at his administration's accomplishments and ahead to a time when he says the state will be in a stronger position to recover from the recession. The governor said he was counting on working with the Obama administration to help push ahead his agenda for an economic recovery. Now, we have team coverage of today's address. We begin with senior political correspondent Michael Aaron, who's standing by at the State House. Michael?
Jim, John Corzine had a difficult task today: defend his administration's record, acknowledge the dire straits we're in, and implicitly make the case that he is the man to lead us for another 5 years. Here's how he did it. As governor, John Corzine has never gotten to deliver a cheerful speech, never gotten to roll out expensive, expansive programs, and now he's governing through the worst economic downturn in 80 years.
In ordinary times, our job is tough, but these are no ordinary times.
New Jersey is a great state, he said, invoking names like Einstein and Edison, Woodrow Wilson and Bruce Springsteen.
We are a creative, can-do people with a fortitude and spirit. We know we will work through today's challenging times.
But then he painted a bleak picture of where we are.
Food pantry calls are up 30% to 40% across the state. 48,000 New Jerseyans received foreclosure notices in 2008, and their ranks are growing. The number of unemployed and uninsured is exploding. It is in this context that we have made the economy priority number 1, priority number 2, and priority number 3.
He touted the economic stimulus measures he has pushed through the legislature this fall, claiming New Jersey has been farther out in front on this than any other state, on things like foreclosure prevention, business tax cuts, and infrastructure investment.
In the next year alone, we're committing, and this is before any federal infrastructure investment program, we're committing $4.7 billion in high-return investments, saving or creating as many as 42,000 New Jersey jobs.
He promoted his stalled plan to allow local governments to defer half their pension payments during this crisis, warning of property tax increases or service cuts if it's not enacted.
Our plan doesn't require towns to put off pension payments. It simply gives them a tool to work through this financial emergency.
And he reviewed a litany of things he says he's done to try to reform government budgeting and planning.
Today, there are nearly 4,000 fewer employees on the state payroll than when I took office, and 3,000 fewer at our independent authorities. That's 7,000 people.
Another area he touched on is ethics reform, where he vowed to finish a job he claims he's made progress on.
Now I'm asking you, the legislature, to end pay-to-play, wheeling, and no-bid contracts at all levels of government.
Corzine made no explicit reference to his re-election, but seemed to anticipate Republican reaction to this speech in this line.
My door is always open to anyone who is seriously interested in putting good ideas on the table, intellectually honest ideas.
He appealed to Democrats by aligning himself with the new president and what Corzine called his progressive vision.
Barack Obama's vision is our vision. And now, thankfully, starting next Tuesday, New Jerseyans have a partner in Washington, a partner who will join us in pursuing a common vision.
In the end, he offered what perhaps could be called his Clint Eastwood moment.
Given the magnitude of the national economic crisis, the challenges we face are unprecedented and daunting. I've never run from a challenge, and I'm not running from this one, and I don't think you are either.
The governor tried to deliver some good news today. He said that our schools are ranked in the top 5 by Education Week magazine, that crime here is down 7%, highway deaths down 18%, and for the building community, he said he would call for a suspension of the 2.5% tax on commercial development as part of the Council on Affordable Housing rules. Bottom line, he said, things are bad, but we'll get through it. What was the reaction to the speech? State House correspondent Zachary Fink is here now with that story. Zach?
Well, thank you, Michael. Obviously, the reaction varies depending on who you ask. Members of Corzine's own party, the Democrats, use words like sober, realistic, and fair to describe not only the content of his speech, but also his demeanor. Republicans, on the other hand, were far more critical, saying he has failed, the governor has failed to make the tough decisions, and that could be a harbinger of what's to come in this re-election year for the governor. For Democrats, Governor Corzine's first State of the State during a year he faces re-election was both realistic and hopeful.
Despite the economic woes of the country and our state, he was trying to look at a glass that was half full and not half empty. So instead of getting up and saying things are horrible, I got to make these horrible cuts, I thought he set a good tone by saying, I want to be optimistic in the speech.
It was sober yet hopeful, and it was optimistic in the sense that we have to work very hard to develop policies that allow us to survive this unprecedented economic challenge.
Republicans had a predictably different view. They fault the governor for not including their ideas when tough decisions about budget priorities need to be made, and they feel as though even in this tough economic climate, New Jersey can do better.
When you look at our neighbors, Connecticut had a job growth rate in 2007 that was 11 times ours. New York was 12 times our rate in 2007 in private sector job growth. Pennsylvania was 6 times. Many of these issues that Governor Corzine identified today were issues of his own making.
Certainly positioning himself for an election year, there's no doubt about it. I mean, some of the things that he's talking about, he talked about before, but we never implemented them, such as a strong ethics package. We've never done that. We could have done that many times.
Corzine has made no secret of the fact that he wants a second term. He faces a potentially tough challenge from Republican Chris Christie, who must still secure the nomination of his own party. Today's speech not only pointed to what Corzine would like to accomplish, but also some of what he considers the highlights of his 3 years in office.
Well, I think he needs to tell people more and more about what he does, because I'll tell you on a first-hand frustration, this governor gets things done and then moves on to the next. And I think that's from his business experience. And the reality is you need to tell people sometimes that you do things well.
I honestly thought that, and I've said this to him before, why aren't we talking about some of the things we accomplished this year? Because we did some great things, like paid family leave, like expanding health care, in a bad economic climate.
At one point, Corzine blamed state leaders for not making tough choices in the past when the economic situation was better.
He's partially right, yes. Things happened in both Republican and Democratic administrations.
Was there mistakes made by both Democratic and Republican legislatures? That, as I said when I was leaving the door as governor, the entitlements are growing at a rate that we can't sustain. And that's correct.
If he did exactly what he knew in his own mind he needed to do, we would have had a different speech today. It would have been much more fire and brimstone, telling the people, I will get you out of this dilemma, I will cut spending, and I will see that this state is back on sound financial footing. That did not happen today.
I mean, he's dealt with extraordinary problems over the last 3 years and has set the table so that when the economy returns, New Jersey will be in a much better place than California, New York, and all the rest of the states.
Now, Corzine has said repeatedly that New Jersey actually is better off than a lot of those states because before the economic crisis, in the last budget cycle, they cut $600 million from the budget. This time around, just recently in the last few weeks, Corzine has proposed another $800 million in cuts for a total of $1.4 billion. He says that puts New Jersey ahead of a lot of states that are going to experience similar budget problems. We're going to be hearing a lot more about next year's budget when Corzine delivers his budget address on March 10th. That's about a week or so later than usual. I'm Zachary Fink, live at the State House. Jim, back to you.
Zach and Michael, thank you for that blanket coverage. And joining us now to offer their insights into the governor's State of the State address are our political insiders, Democrat Julie Roginski and Republican Roger Bodman. Welcome to you both, and thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Julie, why don't we start with you, the Democrat. We heard in Zach's piece Alex DeCroce, the minority leader of the Assembly, say that he believes the governor was positioning himself for an election year. Do you believe that, and how did he do?
Listen, I think he laid out a very sober vision for what's going on right now, and also a hopeful vision, as Dick Cody had said, for what's going to happen in the future. This governor has had to make very, very tough choices. He inherited a mess that was a bipartisan mess, as people have pointed out repeatedly, but I will continue to say that he, with his experience, with the tough choices he's already made, is probably best positioned out of anybody running, Democrat or Republican, to get us out of the mess that we're in right now. A mess not of his making, I might add. A mess partially, if not largely, in the making because of a very bad national economy under the stewardship of George Bush.
Not sure if I heard you say whether he's positioning himself for election in this or not.
Well, he's obviously
Just
running for
briefly.
he really obviously is running for re-election, but look, this governor is a sober man who I think is very careful about doing the right thing as governor, not necessarily first as a candidate, but first as an elected official.
All right, let's turn to Roger. Roger, what did you make of the governor's State of the State address today?
Well, first, you know, he commended the men and women of the National Guard serving in Iraq, and that's certainly something we can all agree with. But as to the substance of the speech, Jim, you know, I think Republicans, as you just heard in Zach Fink's package there, were disappointed. And they were disappointed because, you know, the governor, when he made his inaugural address about 3 years ago, said he would put our fiscal house in order. And the Republicans in the interim years have offered all sorts of proposals, from very specific budget cuts to keeping the rate of budgetary growth tied to the rate of inflation, to requiring a 2/3 vote to raise taxes, a whole host of other good ideas that, had they been adopted, would have certainly put our state in much better financial condition. So for those reasons and others, I think Republicans are generally disappointed.
All right, and the governor, Roger, said, come into my office with a proposal, Michael Aaron used it in his piece,
right,
with a proposal that's real. So he's, in essence, I think, saying that those proposals aren't.
Well, you know, I mean, if the Republicans offer $1.3 billion in very specific cuts, Jim, last year, as they did, you know, somewhere in there, presumably, some of it is real.
Julie, what do you make of the Republicans' assertion that the governor failed to make the tough decisions?
Well, you know, I'm not sure where these Republican budget cuts are coming from. Are they coming from infrastructure that creates jobs and creates safety on the road so we don't have a bridge collapse like we did in Minnesota? Does it come from cutting charitable care to hospitals so that the very neediest have access to health care? Does it come from cutting education spending and education programs that make our schools some of the best in the country? The Republicans, as the governor said, are welcome to provide intellectually honest solutions, but unfortunately they've been grandstanding. The voters have acknowledged the fact that they don't have serious solutions by rejecting Republicans election after election, and I suspect this year will be much the same. A lot of grandstanding, but not a lot of substance, and certainly not a lot of intellectual honesty.
Julie, thank you, and Roger, thank you for coming in, and of course we'll be following this and these issues throughout the gubernatorial campaign of the next 11 months or so. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.